The stars stretched endlessly across the dark void, their light flickering like distant memories. In a remote human colony on the edge of known space, a lone man named Daniel Kane leaned back in his chair, staring at the holographic map floating above his desk. He was a traveler, an explorer, and a problem solver, someone who had seen the wonders and dangers of the universe. The colony was small, a refueling station for passing ships, but tonight, something unusual happened. A distress signal came through his private communicator, an encrypted message sent from deep within alien territory. Daniel frowned. He had encountered many alien civilizations, but this was different. The seal on the message belonged to the Veleri Empire, a reclusive and ancient alien kingdom known for its strict isolation from outsiders. Strange, he muttered to himself. Curiosity got the better of him. He tapped a few buttons on the console, decrypting the message. A holographic image flickered to life. A regal-looking alien woman with pale violet skin, golden eyes, and an aura of authority. Her expression was one of urgency and desperation. To any who received this message, the voice spoke in clear galactic common. I am Queen Xilara of the Veleri Empire. My kingdom stands on the brink of destruction. A great enemy has risen from the shadows, and our defenses are failing. We need aid, and we have no one to turn to. Daniel sat up straight, his mind racing. The Veleri were proud and never asked for help, let alone from humans. Whatever was threatening them must have been truly catastrophic. The message continued. If there is one among you with the courage to stand against darkness, come to our world. This is a call not just for warriors, but for those who can think, who can lead. We will reward those who aid us. The transmission ended, leaving only a set of coordinates and a short timer ticking down, an indicator of how long the message would remain active before self-erasing. Daniel exhaled, rubbing his chin. This wasn't his fight. He had no obligation to help an empire that had kept humans at arm's length for centuries. But there was something in the Queen's voice, a weight, a sincerity that was hard to ignore. He had seen enough worlds fall to know that sometimes an outsider's perspective was exactly what was needed. A soft beep interrupted his thoughts. A news report flashed across his screen, listing recent attacks in Veleri space. Entire fleets had gone missing. Space stations had gone dark. Rumors spoke of an enemy unlike anything seen before. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. Looks like I'm taking a little trip. A journey into the unknown. Within the hour, Daniel had packed his essentials and boarded his ship, the Odyssey. It wasn't the most advanced vessel, but it was fast and reliable, built for deep space travel. As the engines roared to life, the colony's automated traffic control granted him clearance. Destination, the system's AI asked. Coordinates received from the Veleri message. A brief silence, then a robotic reply. Warning. The destination is beyond human-controlled space. Proceed with caution. Daniel smirked. Yeah, I got it. Let's go. The ship's thrusters ignited, and in a blink, he was gone, racing through hyperspace toward the unknown. As the journey stretched on, Daniel reviewed everything he knew about the Veleri. They were an advanced and ancient species, deeply rooted in tradition. Their empire was once untouchable, ruled by a single monarch, the Veleri Queen. Despite their might, they avoided contact with humans, believing them to be reckless and unpredictable. Yet now, that same empire was begging for help. He checked the star charts. His destination was Velthera Prime, the heart of the Veleri Empire. It would take a few days to reach, and with each passing hour, his mind filled with questions. What kind of enemy could bring an empire to its knees? And why had they called for a human? A silent welcome. After days of travel, Daniel finally arrived. As he exited hyperspace, his eyes widened at the sight before him. Velthera Prime was breathtaking. A planet of floating crystalline cities, glowing rivers of energy, and massive structures that defied gravity. But the beauty was overshadowed by something else. The war had already reached them. Wreckage drifted through the atmosphere, the remains of destroyed battleships. Smoke curled from distant cities. The Velari homeworld, once a beacon of stability, was now under siege. Daniel's ship received an automated landing directive. He followed the path down, skimming over the ruined outskirts of the capital. As he landed, a group of heavily armed alien guards approached his vessel. Their armor was sleek, their weapons humming with power. Daniel raised his hands, stepping forward cautiously. Before he could speak, one of them, a tall warrior with silver markings on his armor, spoke first. "You are the human who answered the Queen's call." Daniel nodded. "Yeah. Name's Daniel Kane." The warrior exchanged a look with his companions before stepping aside. "Come. The Queen is waiting for you." As Daniel followed them into the depths of the city, he knew one thing for sure. This was bigger than he had imagined, and he had just stepped into the heart of a war he didn't understand. Daniel followed the alien guards through the ruined streets of Velthera Prime. The once proud capital of the Velari Empire was now a battlefield. Towers that had once stood tall were reduced to rubble, and the air smelled of smoke and burning metal. The few citizens still outside hurried through the streets, fear in their eyes. Daniel had seen war before, but this was different. The Velari, known for their strength and wisdom, looked shaken. Their empire, which had lasted for thousands of years, was crumbling. The guards led Daniel through a massive set of gates that opened into the royal palace. The structure was still intact, but the damage was visible. Cracks ran along the walls, and guards stood on high alert, their hands gripping weapons tightly. As they entered the main hall, Daniel saw Queen Silera seated on a high throne, her expression hard but weary. She was tall, with violet skin and golden eyes that shone even in the dim lighting. She wore a regal gown embroidered with silver threads, but her posture showed tension. Beside her stood Princess Sayari, her daughter. Unlike her mother, she had a more skeptical look on her face, her piercing eyes studying Daniel, as if he were an experiment. She had the same violet skin, but her silver hair was tied back in a warrior's braid. The guard stepped aside, allowing Daniel to step forward. The Queen spoke first, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "You are the human who answered our call." Daniel nodded. "Yeah. Name's Daniel Kane. You said your kingdom needed help. I figured I'd see what I could do." The Queen's gaze flickered with something, relief. Doubt? It was hard to tell. She gestured toward the large map projected in the center of the room. It showed the Velari Empire, once vast, now shrinking under red marks indicating enemy-controlled territory. "Our enemy is the Vorkan Dominion," she explained, motioning to the areas where the attacks had occurred. They were once a scattered group of warlords, but in the last few years they have united under a new leader, General Vorkar. He fights without honor, without mercy. He has burned our colonies, enslaved our people, and now he has brought war to our homeworld. Daniel crossed his arms. "And your forces? What happened to your fleets?" Princess Sayari finally spoke, her tone sharp. "They were outmatched. The Vorkans do not fight like normal warriors. They use deception, brutal tactics, and overwhelming force. They attacked where we least expected, sabotaged our supply lines, and crushed our defenses before we could react." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "So, they're smart." The Queen nodded grimly. "Yes, and that is why we need outside help. The Velari are strong, but we do not think like the Vorkans. We have fought honorably for centuries, following the codes of war. But this enemy, they fight differently." Daniel sighed. "You're saying you need someone who thinks outside the box." The Queen looked at him seriously. "Yes, we need a human. The plan begins." Daniel walked around the map, analyzing the battlefield. The Velari had strong defenses, but their enemy was attacking their weaknesses. They needed a strategy that the Vorkans wouldn't expect. He turned to the Queen. "All right, here's what we do. First, we stopped playing by their rules. You said they rely on deception. Good. We can use that against them. Sayari folded her arms, skeptical. How? Daniel smirked. We set a trap. The Queen and her advisors listened as he explained his idea. Instead of defending their capital directly, they would make the Vorkans believe the Vel Eri were retreating. They would pull back their forces, leaving behind what appeared to be a weak, vulnerable target. When the Vorkans moved in, thinking they had won, the Vel Eri would strike from the shadows. Queen Silura considered his words carefully. This is not how we fight, but perhaps that is why it will work. Daniel shrugged. War isn't about fairness. It's about survival. Sayari narrowed her eyes. And you truly believe you can help us win? Daniel met her gaze. I don't believe. I know. The Queen took a deep breath. Then, Daniel Kane, you will lead this counterattack. The fate of my people depends on it. Daniel gave her a confident nod. Then let's get to work. As he turned toward the war room, he could feel Sayari's eyes still watching him, filled with doubt. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But soon, she would see what a human mind was capable of. Daniel stood in the war room, surrounded by holographic maps, tactical plans, and a group of Vel Eri commanders who were still unsure of him. The Queen had given him command of the counterattack, but trust wasn't something that came easily in this empire, especially not from Princess Sayari. She sat across the table, arms folded, her sharp golden eyes locked onto him. You talk big, human, she said, but war is not a game. The Vorkans have destroyed fleets, toppled cities, and crushed warriors stronger than you. Daniel smirked, leaning against the table. That's because you keep fighting them like a traditional army. You expect them to follow rules, but they won't. They fight dirty. One of the commanders, an older Vel Eri named General Tavo, frowned. You suggest we abandon our honor. Daniel shook his head. No, I'm saying we use their own tactics against them. Trick them, confuse them, hit them where they don't expect. He pointed at the map, highlighting a key Vorkan supply outpost. We make them think you're retreating, but instead, you're drawing them into a trap. When they get comfortable, we strike. The Queen studied the plan. It is risky, but I see the logic. Sayari's expression remained unreadable. And if you fail? Daniel grinned. I don't fail. The trap is set. The next day, Vel Eri forces began their retreat. Their troops pulled back from the battlefield, leaving false weak points in their defenses. It looked like they were abandoning key areas, but in reality, they were setting an ambush. Daniel led a small strike team to the abandoned supply outpost. He carried human-built weapons, compact, efficient, and brutal. Unlike the sleek Vel Eri energy rifles, these were designed for messy, close-quarters combat. His team included Vel Eri warriors, all of whom were skeptical of him, but followed orders under the Queen's command. Among them was Sayari, much to Daniel's surprise. She adjusted her combat armor and checked her weapon. If you're leading this mission, I want to see it with my own eyes. Daniel smirked. Afraid I'll take all the glory. She gave him a cold look. Afraid you'll get us all killed. He chuckled. Then stay close. I'd hate for you to miss how a human wins a war. The battle begins. As expected, the Vorkans took the bait. Their warships descended upon the abandoned outpost, believing they had caught the Vel Eri in a full retreat. From the shadows, Daniel and his team waited, hidden in ruined buildings, inside old supply crates, beneath camouflaged structures, watching. The Vorkan soldiers, towering brutes clad in dark battle armor, marched forward, scanning the area. Their leader, Commander Vorgel, sneered. Pathetic Vel Eri cowards. Running again. Daniel whispered into his communicator. Wait, wait. More Vorkan troops entered the area, spreading out, lowering their guard. Daniel smiled. Now, from every direction, chaos erupted. Explosions tore through the enemy ranks as hidden charges detonated. Vel'Ari warriors rained down plasma fire from above. Snipers took out key targets. Traps disabled enemy weapons. Daniel leaped into action, wielding the human-crafted shotgun, moving fast between cover, taking down Vorkan soldiers with precise, brutal efficiency. Sayari fought beside him, her movements swift and deadly, her blade slicing through enemies with a warrior's grace. For the first time, she saw how humans fought. Adaptable, ruthless, and unpredictable. The Vorkan forces panicked. They had walked into a death trap, their numbers useless in the tight battlefield. Within minutes, their formation collapsed. Commander Vorgel, bleeding from a wound in his side, snarled. "You, filthy humans, fight like animals." Daniel smirked, reloading his weapon. "That's why we win." With a final shot, Vorgel fell. The Vorkan survivors fled, leaving their supplies and weapons behind. It was over. A newfound respect. As the dust settled, the Vel'Ari warriors stared at Daniel in shock. They had expected him to fail, but instead, he had led them to their first real victory. Even General Xavo, who had doubted him, gave a slow nod. Perhaps humans do have their uses. Daniel shrugged. "Glad you're finally catching up." Sayari, who had been the most skeptical, looked at him differently now. She had fought beside him, seen his tactics, witnessed his courage. She walked up to him, her expression unreadable. "You're reckless, unpredictable, arrogant." Daniel smirked. "You forgot charming." She sighed, shaking her head. "But you saved our people today. That is something I cannot ignore." Daniel raised an eyebrow. Was that a compliment? She smirked for the first time. "Don't get used to it, human." But Daniel knew. He had earned her respect. And soon, the whole Vel'Ari Empire would see why humans were not to be underestimated. The victory at the outpost sent shockwaves through the Vel'Ari Empire. For the first time in years, they had defeated the Vorkans in battle, and it was all because of a human strategy. But Daniel knew better than to celebrate too soon. The war wasn't over. He stood in the war room of the royal palace, studying the holographic map. The Vorkan forces were regrouping, preparing for a final assault on Vel'Thera Prime, the heart of the Vel'Ari Empire. Queen Silara sat on her throne, listening carefully. Her daughter, Princess Sayari, stood beside her, arms folded, watching Daniel with narrowed eyes. "The Vorkans won't make the same mistake twice," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "They underestimated us before. This time, they'll come with everything they have." The Queen nodded. "We cannot withstand another full-scale attack. Our forces are still recovering from the last battle." General Xavo, the most experienced of the Vel'Ari commanders, spoke. "Then what do you suggest, human?" Daniel smirked. "We take the fight to them." The room fell silent. Even Sayari looked surprised. "Attack?" she asked. "That's madness." Daniel shook his head. "No, it's strategy. The Vorkans expect you to stay here and defend. But if we hit them first, where they least expect, we can cripple their fleet before they even reach your homeworld." The Queen leaned forward. "And where do you suggest we strike?" Daniel zoomed in on the holographic map, pointing to a massive space station orbiting the gas giant Xavros 5. This is their main supply hub. Every warship, every soldier, every weapon they use, it all passes through here. If we destroy it, they'll be left scrambling. Sayari frowned. "But that station is heavily guarded." Daniel grinned. "Exactly. They'll never expect us to attack it." The Queen studied him carefully. "You are asking us to risk everything on one mission." Daniel met her gaze. "That's how you win wars, Your Majesty. Big risks, big rewards." There was a long pause. Then, to everyone's surprise, Queen Silara nodded. "Very well, human. You will lead this mission. If you succeed, the Vel'Ari Empire may yet survive." A dangerous plan. A fleet of Vel-Eri warships launched from Vel-Thera Prime, heading toward Savros 5 under the cover of darkness. The plan was simple. A small strike team would infiltrate the station, plant explosives on the main reactor, and escape before it detonated. Daniel, of course, was leading the team. And much to his surprise, Sayuri volunteered to go with him. "Didn't take you for the reckless type," he joked as they suited up. She rolled her eyes. "Someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed." Daniel grinned. "You care that much, huh?" She ignored him, but he saw the small smirk on her lips. The infiltration begins. The strike team slipped past enemy patrols, using stealth suits to blend into the shadows. The station was massive, filled with Vorkan soldiers loading weapons, refueling warships, and maintaining the fleet's core systems. Daniel led the way, motioning for the team to move silently. They planted charges on key support beams, targeting the reactor core deep within the station. Everything was going smoothly, until one of the Vorkan patrols spotted them. An alarm blared through the halls. "Intruders detected. Secure the reactor." Daniel cursed. "Well, so much for stealth. Time for Plan B," Sayuri said, drawing her energy blade. "We had a Plan B," Daniel asked. "We fight." Battle in the station. The halls erupted in blaster fire and explosions as Daniel and Sayuri fought side by side. She was fast and precise, cutting through enemies with deadly efficiency. Daniel, on the other hand, was brutal and unpredictable, using his human agility and quick reflexes to outmaneuver the Vorkans. Despite being outnumbered, the strike team pushed forward, clearing a path toward the reactor. Daniel planted the final charge, setting the detonation timer for 5 minutes. "We need to move now," he shouted. But before they could escape, a massive Vorkan warrior stepped into their path. General Vorkar himself. A fight to the death. Vorkar was twice the size of Daniel, his armor thick as steel. He growled, gripping a massive plasma axe. "You should not have come here, human." Daniel grinned. "Yeah, and here I thought you'd be happy to see me." Vorkar swung his axe, barely missing as Daniel dodged and rolled aside. Sayuri leaped in from the side, her blade slicing through his shoulder, but the Vorkan general barely flinched. "Is that all?" Vorkar taunted. Daniel grabbed a grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and shoved it into the gap in Vorkar's armor. Boom! The explosion sent the general crashing into the wall. He roared in pain, but before he could recover, Sayuri delivered the final strike, piercing his chest with her energy blade. The mighty Vorkan warlord fell, unmoving. Daniel let out a breath. "Remind me not to make you mad." Sayuri smirked, then stopped being annoying. Escape and victory. The team rushed toward the hangar, boarding their escape ship just as the station began to collapse. From the safety of space, they watched as the explosives detonated, tearing the Vorkan supply hub apart. Queen Solara's fleet arrived just in time to wipe out the remaining Vorkan warships. The mission was a success. For the first time, the Vorkans were on the defensive. As Daniel sat back in his seat, exhausted but victorious, Sayuri looked at him with something new in her eyes. Respect. And maybe something more. The Vel-Eri fleet soared through the debris-filled battlefield, their sleek warships now in control. The Vorkan supply hub had been destroyed, and their forces were left scattered and weakened. Inside the royal warship, Daniel Kane stood beside Princess Sayuri, watching the ruins of the enemy station from the bridge. The explosion had been massive, a devastating loss for the Vorkans. "That should keep them busy for a while," Daniel muttered, crossing his arms. Sayuri, still gripping the hilt of her energy blade, exhaled. "We did it." Daniel glanced at her. "You doubted me." She turned to him, eyes sharp as ever. "Of course. You're reckless." Then, after a pause, she added, "But you won." Daniel smirked. "Told you." Before she could respond, a message from Queen Solara came through the ship's communication system. Return to the capital immediately. We must prepare for what comes next. Daniel exchanged a look with Sayari. The war wasn't over yet. The Queen's recognition. Back on Velthera Prime, the palace was alive with Vel-Eri soldiers and citizens celebrating the victory. The destruction of the Vorkan supply hub had crippled their fleet, and for the first time in years, the Vel-Eri had hope. Daniel, however, wasn't one for celebrations. He stood near the grand balcony, looking over the recovering city. The damage from the war was still visible, but the people were no longer afraid. A familiar voice spoke behind him. "You don't celebrate your victories." Daniel turned to see Queen Silara, her golden eyes studying him. She looked different now, not just regal, but relieved. "Celebrations are for when the war is over," Daniel replied. The Queen nodded. Wise words. She stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "You have done more than we ever expected, Daniel Kane. You have given us a fighting chance." Daniel shrugged. "You needed a different way to fight. I just pointed you in the right direction." The Queen smiled slightly. "Humility is rare among warriors, but make no mistake, you have earned the respect of my people. And of me." Daniel nodded, appreciating the words. Then, to his surprise, the Queen said something unexpected. "As a token of my gratitude, I offer you my daughter's hand in marriage." The unexpected reward. Silence hung in the air for a moment. Daniel blinked, sure he had misheard. "Come again." Sayari, standing nearby, suddenly turned toward her mother. "Mother, what?" The Queen remained calm. "You have proven your worth in battle. You have saved our people. Among the Vel-Eri, such deeds are rewarded. My daughter is the heir to the throne. With you by her side, our empire will be stronger." Daniel scratched the back of his neck, glancing at Sayari. She looked just as surprised as he was. "Look, no offense, but I wasn't exactly expecting to, get engaged today." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "Do you reject my offer?" Daniel exhaled. "It's not that. It's just, Sayari and I barely know each other." Sayari, who had been silent, finally spoke. "He's right, Mother. She trailed off, struggling to find the words. Queen Silara studied them both. "Then consider it not an order, but an opportunity. The two of you have fought side by side. You have proven your strength together. Perhaps in time, you will see the wisdom in this." Daniel sighed. "And if we don't?" The Queen smiled slightly. "Then you remain an honored hero of our people. But something tells me your story is not finished yet." Sayari looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Daniel, sensing the tension, chuckled. "Well, this just got interesting." The growing tension. Later that night, Daniel sat outside the palace, looking up at the two moons of Velthera. He had fought in wars, traveled across countless star systems, and faced impossible odds. But this was new. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "You're taking this well." He turned to see Sayari, arms crossed, her silver hair reflecting the moonlight. Daniel smirked. "You mean the whole alien queen offering her daughter to a human thing?" "Yeah, not exactly something I had on my list today." Sayari sighed, sitting beside him. "My mother does not make careless decisions. She believes this alliance will strengthen the empire." Daniel leaned back. "And what do you think?" Sayari hesitated before answering. "I think she's not wrong." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because you don't exactly seem thrilled about it." She looked at him, her golden eyes thoughtful. "I have spent my life fighting for my people. I never expected this, but you are not like the others. You are reckless, but you are strong. And you saved us." Daniel grinned. "Is that a compliment?" Sayari rolled her eyes but smirked. "Don't get used to it, human." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything settling in. Finally, Daniel sighed. "Well, guess we'll see where this goes." Sayari nodded. "Yes, we will." As the moons of Velthera shone above them, neither of them knew what the future held. But one thing was certain. This war wasn't over yet. Daniel sat in the royal chambers, his mind racing. He had fought battles, survived impossible odds, and outmaneuvered enemies that seemed unstoppable. But nothing had prepared him for this, being offered the hand of an alien princess as a reward for saving her kingdom. The door slid open, and General Xavo entered. The older Vel-Eri warrior studied Daniel for a moment before speaking. "You look troubled, human." Daniel smirked. "Yeah, well, it's not every day a queen tells you to marry her daughter." Xavo nodded. "Queen Silara is wise. She does not make such offers lightly." Daniel leaned forward. "Is this really how things work here? Marriage as a reward?" Xavo gave him a sharp look. "It is not a mere reward. Among our people, marriage is more than tradition. It is a symbol of trust, unity, and strength. You have proven yourself in battle, and the Queen sees in you what many of us were blind to, that humans are more than we believed." Daniel sighed. "And what does Sayari think?" Xavo was silent for a moment. "That is for you to ask her." A conversation under the stars. Later that night, Daniel found Sayari on the palace balcony, gazing up at the twin moons of Velthera. The cool night breeze made her silver hair shimmer under the starlight. Deep in thought, Daniel asked, leaning beside her. She glanced at him, then returned her gaze to the sky. "This is my home. I have fought for it my entire life. And now, suddenly, I am told my future is to be something else." Daniel smirked. "Trust me, I know the feeling." For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the situation hanging between them. Finally, Sayari spoke. "You don't want this, do you?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not about what I want. It's about what makes sense. Look, Sayari, we barely know each other. You're a warrior princess from an alien empire, and I'm just a human who happened to show up at the right time. Are we really supposed to just go along with this?" Sayari exhaled. "Among my people, duty often comes before personal choice. But I never imagined this." Daniel looked at her seriously. "So, what do you want?" She hesitated, then met his gaze. "I don't know. But I know that if we do this, it should be because we choose to, not because my mother decided it for us." Daniel nodded. "Agreed. But if we say no, what happens then?" Sayari smirked slightly. "Then my mother will be disappointed, and you will still be a hero to my people. But you may never find another opportunity quite like this." Daniel chuckled. "You sound like you're trying to convince me." Sayari rolled her eyes. "I am saying that this is not just about us. This is about unity between our people. It is about survival." Daniel sighed. "Then maybe we start with something simpler." She raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" He smirked. "We fight this war together. We win. Then we see where it goes." Sayari considered his words, then nodded. "That I can agree to." They shook hands, a silent agreement between warriors. For now, the war came first. The final battle approaches. The next day, alarms echoed through the palace as scouts reported massive enemy movement. The Vorkans were coming. Daniel, now standing with the Velderi commanders, studied the incoming fleet on the war table. "They're throwing everything they've got at us," General Tavo said grimly. "They want to end this war once and for all." Queen Silara remained composed. "Then we must do the same." She turned to Daniel. "You have led us to victory before. What is your plan now?" Daniel stared at the holographic display, his mind working fast. The Vorkans had superior numbers, but that didn't mean they were unstoppable. "We split their forces," he said. "They're expecting a full frontal assault. Instead, we divide them, disrupt their communication, and take out their leadership." Sayari stepped forward. "I will leave the ground forces." Daniel smirked. "You sure? You might miss fighting at my side." She smirked back. "I'll manage. Just don't get yourself killed." Daniel turned back to the queen. If we do this right, the Vorkans won't just lose this battle. They'll never recover. Lara nodded. Then let it be done. Preparing for war. As the Veleri fleet prepared for battle, Daniel stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the enemy forces approach. The final battle was here. Sayari appeared beside him, her armor gleaming under the ship's lights. "We may not survive this," she said quietly. Daniel smirked. "If I worried about that, I wouldn't be here." She studied him for a moment, then did something unexpected. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay alive, human." Daniel grinned. "Same to you, princess." The alarms blared. The Vorkans had arrived. Daniel took a deep breath. This was it, the final stand. The Veleri fleet stood at the edge of their homeworld's orbit, facing the vast Vorkan armada that darkened the stars. This was it, the final battle, the moment that would decide the fate of the Veleri Empire. Daniel Kane stood on the bridge of the Veleri flagship, his eyes locked on the enemy forces. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was the biggest fight of his life. Beside him, Princess Sayari adjusted her combat armor, her silver hair tied back in a tight braid. She turned to him, her golden eyes filled with determination. "Are you ready, human?" Daniel smirked. "Born ready." The battle was about to begin. The war unleashed. As soon as the Vorkan fleet entered range, the sky erupted with fire. Massive Veleri warships exchanged heavy plasma blasts with the Vorkan battleships. Smaller fighter crafts zigzagged through the battlefield, their energy weapons lighting up the darkness. Daniel's plan was already in motion. Instead of engaging in a full head-on battle, the Veleri forces split into 3 groups, using their superior speed and maneuverability to outflank the Vorkans. The Vorkans, overconfident in their brute force, fell right into the trap. On the planet's surface, Sayari led the ground forces, engaging Vorkan shock troops who had attempted to land. She fought with deadly precision, her energy blade cutting through enemy lines as her warriors pushed back the invaders. She was fighting for her home, for her people, and perhaps for something more. A bold move. Back in orbit, Daniel noticed something on the scanners. The Vorkan flagship, the heart of the enemy fleet, was positioned at the center. It was coordinating all enemy movements. If they could take it down, the Vorkan forces would fall into chaos. He turned to General Tavo. "I need a small team. We're taking the fight directly to their leader." Savo's eyes widened. "You want to board their flagship? That is suicide." Daniel smirked. "Not if I do it right." The Queen's voice came through the comms. "Do what you must, Daniel Kane. You have never failed us before." Moments later, Daniel and a small strike team launched from the Veleri fleet, speeding toward the Vorkan flagship in a stolen enemy transport. As they approached, Daniel gripped his weapon. This was it. Time to end this war. Inside the enemy's lair, the transport slammed into the side of the Vorkan flagship, breaking through its outer defenses. Daniel and his team stormed in, taking down enemy guards with precise, efficient attacks. Their target, the Vorkan warlord himself, General Vorkar. They fought their way through the halls, Daniel moving fast, his human reflexes giving him an edge over the slower, bulkier Vorkans. Finally, they reached the command chamber, where Vorkar stood waiting. The massive Vorkan leader, clad in dark battle armor, gripped a massive war axe, his red eyes burning with rage. "Foolish human, you think you can defeat me?" Daniel smirked, raising his blaster. "Yeah, actually, I do." The fight began. The final duel. Vorkar swung his axe, nearly splitting Daniel in half. But Daniel was fast, dodging at the last second and firing a shot into the warlord's side. Vorkar growled in pain but didn't stop. He was stronger, but Daniel was smarter. The battle raged, both warriors matching each other move for move. Daniel had faced aliens before, but Vorkar was different, a brutal, unstoppable force of nature. Then, just when it seemed like Vorkar had the upper hand, Daniel pulled out a hidden energy blade, a weapon he had taken from a fallen Vel'Ari warrior. He lunged forward, driving the blade into the warlord's chest. Vorkar's eyes widened in shock. Impossible. Daniel twisted the blade, stepping back as the massive alien staggered, then collapsed. The Vorkan fleet lost its leader. And with that, the war was over. The war ends, a new beginning. As soon as Vorkar fell, the Vorkan forces lost coordination. Their fleet, leaderless and disorganized, was soon overwhelmed by the Vel'Ari counterattack. The battle that had seemed impossible was won. When Daniel returned to Vel'Thera Prime, the Queen herself greeted him with gratitude. "You have done what no Vel'Ari could, Daniel Kane. You have saved our people." The celebrations lasted for days, but for Daniel, there was still one final decision to make. Daniel's choice. One evening, as the celebrations died down, Daniel stood once again on the palace balcony. He heard footsteps behind him. Sayari. She joined him, her expression unreadable. "You won us the war." Daniel chuckled. "We won the war. Took both of us, remember." Sayari exhaled. "And now, my mother's offer still stands." Daniel turned to her, studying her face. She was strong, intelligent, and fiercely loyal. Over time, he had come to respect her deeply, and maybe something more. But was this really his place? He thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'm not the kind of guy who makes decisions just because someone tells me to." Sayari smirked. "No, you are not." Daniel took a deep breath. "But I also don't walk away from something that feels right." Sayari tilted her head. "And this?" Daniel turned to face her completely. "This feels right." Sayari didn't reply at first. Then, after a moment, she reached out and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, they both knew. A new journey was beginning. Together. Epilogue. A legend begins. Daniel Kane, the human warrior who saved an empire, became a legend among the Vel'Ari people. His name would be spoken in stories for generations. Some said he stayed with the Vel'Ari, ruling beside Sayari as her partner. Others believed he continued traveling the stars, always searching for the next adventure. But one thing was certain, he had changed the course of history. And the universe would never forget the human who defied the impossible. The end.